please sign the petition.
Fuck with your deception, keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending, found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing, all the other gang are stressing. IPS be on a nesting, only real ones gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this, they can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah, find them in our wreckage. Auto host and message, squad are represented. Killing you with knowledge, yeah, the oppa's getting deadly. Oh, you're so affected, cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah, the whole thing is a setup. We got it and we get it, offering refreshment. Level up your conscience, yeah, it's honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable, facts are undebatable. You lanes are unrelatable, give a fuck about saving you. We could keep on playing you, you just keep complaining too. Game is unescapable, unless you're with the gang or no.
Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, 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 fucking with the penguins, yeah, with the penguins. Coming with a vengeance, trying to make you come to your senses. Forget the general consensus, just pay attention. The rules to hell is paid with good intentions. I'm clenching, my back wrenching, representing only the most superior, independent media. We got that real shit, fucking encyclopedia. We're bringing an end to this mass hysteria. They wanna know why it's so serious, cause you must be delirious. If you're still believing stuff, get a grip and show some evidence for your bold claims. We don't play no games, we stay relentless, exposing those events. Quick, the IPS are making an entrance. Busting doors down, cause now's the time for interventions that I mentioned. We're affecting so many men across the spectrum. We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum. There's nothing close resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like 10 pin, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Got another hopes army, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin. You're messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin, you're messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin.
Alright, this is Pepe Akbar featuring Lee Dion. Allergic to Bullshit, Lee Dion. I put the link below if you want to get the YouTube video on your playlist, and then also leave a comment. I want to do a bit more for the music on the channel and all the content creators and musicians. There's just so many, and I don't want any of it to be buried, as you know, time flies by so fast. So I am working on putting a folder together, as a number of people have suggested I do, so we can crank on the 24/7 again, and in between archives we can play old and new music. Not that any of it's really that old. I mean, this has only just been about 6.5 years that this think tank has been rolling forward here. So this is 7/31/2024 Infinite Plane Radio. Welcome to the planet Netflix, situated in the Disney universe. And that's pretty much what we're looking at here, worldview. And it seems like our worldview is actually more or less projected onto the entertainment, and then it's played in real life. In fact, I was just out doing some field research. I was at the theaters watching Fly Me to the Moon. And there was only 2 other people there. Like, these theaters are empty. Sometimes I wonder, maybe there was a pandemic. Or maybe that conditioned people to be more home oriented and everyone just fixed up their home entertainment, because nobody's going to these theaters and they're really nice. But I went in and I watched Fly Me to the Moon, so I took a lot of notes, which I'll be going through. I kind of gave a preview to members, and there's lots of members. So if you have a blue wrench, you can watch the ones that are paywalled here. And I kind of threw in a few spoilers. And you shouldn't be mad if you get spoilers for just some propaganda film, and it's all propaganda. Entertainment's a side effect. Don't get mad if you come in here and you overhear some spoiler for the next big movie, because we're pro-offering here spoilers for real life. Like, oh, by the way, Infinite Plane Radio listeners, there's going to be a head wound on Trump coming up. I mean, no one here was surprised. And one of the things that I do when I watch these movies is I watch the trailers, because it turns out, and I've been right every time, the trailers contain copious predictive programming. You don't want to miss any of it. And sometimes it's part of the same message. In this case, I was looking at the trailer for Megaopolis. Francis Ford Coppola, Godfather, Megaopolis. And we've talked about this a bit, and I'm going to have to watch it. But it begins with this image of the Statue of Liberty. I think there's fire in the background, so it's very reminiscent of the damaged Statue of Liberty with the Paris Olympics opening, which that's from Planet of the Apes, which is all about post-nuclear apocalypse, far in the future, etc. And in that future, they ridiculously worship the Alpha Omega bomb. They worship a nuclear missile. And I'm like, well, that's exactly how people are today. If you believe in the possibility of being Oppenheimered, you basically worship that explosive obelisk. You know, it's superstition. You think you're ducking and covering for your safety. No, you're actually genuflecting. It's a form of prayer. You're showing off your fear to the war god construct that the state has created for you. Now, I don't worship any of their gods. I'm sort of an outsider anthropologist to the state religion of mainstream media, and we examine it from this perspective, objectively, detached, dispassionate, but very conspiratained. You know, this is the opposite of boring. So, Megaopolis, the trailer has the Statue of Liberty busted up and space junk falling from the sky, and it starts describing what happens when an empire dies. Now, right off the bat, I read about Megaopolis in a Vanity Fair article, and it begins with the director saying that it always had to do with an old Russian satellite falling to the Earth. So there's that. Then he mentions that they had to scrap an entire scene because it was so reminiscent of 9/11. And in fact, he delayed the movie for these 20 years because 9/11 kind of changed the character of New York, and he didn't want the film released in post 9/11 America. It wouldn't have worked for his whatever reasons, so he postponed it. But already now, you have a film connected with 9/11 predictive programming, even though it wasn't produced yet. So now it's coming out, and I've been saying that the next big 9/11, a huge part of this, one of the major psyops to come is the space junk one, the space station falling, and how the space station represents the Tower of Babel. All mankind united, one mission from Earth to the heavens. It's the Tower of Babel. The Apollo mission actually represents, I believe, man's incursion into heaven, and stepping on the moon is stepping on, God's floor without taking his shoes off. Like, it's an incursion. It represents Nimrod and his hubris, which needs to be taken down. And so this big meta-narrative from the Titanic sinking, Twin Towers, the One World Trade Tower, to the space station, there's this contiguous narrative of the Tower of Babel being built. Actually, America is the Tower of Babel. We've talked about the significance of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, which we can get back into. But my point here, specifically, is that Megaopolis is about New York as Babylon. And the space junk thing is here. And again, 9/11 predictive programming, and now some kind of space junk thing. Well, shortly after the movie was released, a Russian satellite had been hit by junk and blew up into hundreds of pieces, and the astronauts had to duck and cover in the space station. They had to leave their spacewalk. Now, of course, this is make-believe, but this is the story. This is the news that will be in history. We know the truth, but so the public is being told, yeah, just a Russian satellite blowing up and endangering the ISS, which again symbolizes international solidarity, mankind united in this mission to heaven. And they're about to break that up. Now, on January 19th, I went to watch the movie ISS. And there's a few reasons why 119 is significant. We won't get into that now. But it was Russia and America fighting in the space station while nukes are going off down below. And by the way, there were no loose hairs in that movie. I called out NASA and I said, there's no way that NASA is going to allow some movie to outdo them with the hair faking, because it'll draw attention to how fake NASA's hair stuff is done. Because NASA uses hairspray, and they make it very stiff and ridiculous. and I don't think they want to be outdone. So there weren't any loose hairs, so you couldn't compare. But I did a lot of comparison between the movie version of the space station and the real thing, because it's hilarious how the movie versions are more realistic than the real thing. That's an inversion, and people seem to miss this. But again, Megaopolis, space junk thing, coincidences. All right, let's see who's arrived in chat, and then we'll start hitting the notes. And I'll open up phones. John Lebsock first, P Trippa 103. Frank Murr, thank you for joining. Ollie Goering, Let's Go Tunex. Jennifer Reeves, Daniel Morris. All right, we've got about 55 so far. Rooster Cogburn says, I see. Yeah, we don't do identity politics here, so I'll be blocking you. Neo-Nazis, white replacement theorists, I don't know what they find in this. Like, I'm sorry, but we don't believe in any of your myths. You have no reason to be here. I was like watching the news a little bit about Project 2025, and they're trying to use it to tarnish Trump, and he's trying to distance himself from it. Project 2025 was like Nick Fuentes' wish list. And it's like, if they actually implemented this, your family would be deported. I mean, it's strange how all these white nationalist leaders are not exactly representatives of white purity. It's so hypocritical, or it's a LARP, which is what I think. But what isn't a LARP when it comes to news? Imagine being a politico, an influencer, creating content and not knowing that all this news is fake and scripted, thinking that Trump's little performance, his magic trick with the blading of his ear was real. I mean, and then continuing, so you're in this box and you think all this stuff is real, and then you encounter infinite plane radio and you actually think about what we're pointing out. To me, that has the potential for I think, paradigm shock. American Fathers, thank you for joining. Lesgo says music here is top shelf. Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be emphasizing much more of that here in the coming weeks. And we're planning on the asteroid. If you didn't know, there's a planet killer on the way. And it's going to preempt Apophis 99942, the planet killer that was supposed to hit us, or it's scheduled to hit us, on Friday the 13th, April of 2029. But there's another one. It's called AH 2024. Autohoaxology 2024. It's a planet killer asteroid, or more accurately, a world stage killer. Now, I'm not going to give away the particular form it's going to assume when it hits, but yes, there's definitely a paradigm shock to the system en route. I got inspired by this article about this thing called a logic bomb, which is it's just sort of I'm thinking about this not in the computer sense, but in another sense. But I'm just thinking about what a disruption it would be if a lot of these highly paid liars figured out what they actually are. But the media has no self-awareness. In fact, I would call it a narcissistic construct. It's a big vampire, and they have no reflection, no insight. They're in a box, and it's fascinating to watch people in the box contorting themselves to explain what they're seeing, and it shows you how subjective reality is. And it's highlighted with the QAnon group and these various cults that have sprung up in recent years. I mean, 10 years ago, would you have believed that there would be a cult of people driving around the country in red caps believing that JFK, at 110 years old, was coming back to save them from Hillary Clinton and some underground cult of child trafficking vampires? Like, no one would have believed it. This is the world we live in. I'm talking the mainstream news today. The mainstream mediated worldview is weirder than David Icke's darkest vision back in the biggest secret Children of the Matrix days. Okay, and again, we're going to take phone calls, so I'm going to be opening up the phones, numbers on the screen, 505-510-4226. Bach Precision says it's prostration. Yes, well said. Oh yeah, I would consider this, that when you are ducking and covering, you're bowing to an emblem of state power. Whether it's ducking and covering because there's a school shooter, or you're ducking and covering because of the atom bomb. You're ducking to the God constructs that they designed to scare you. And I think the school shooting drills are designed to give you Stockholm Syndrome, where you fall in love with your captor, which is the state. So like, oh, I'm scared of the the MAGA kid with the gun, but these SWAT team guys with the big guns having us rushed out of the schools with their hands on our heads. Yeah, we trust them. Like there's major cog dis being programmed into the masses, MK Ultra theater. But I would suggest too that even recycling is a form of contrition, confession. Like, okay, these are the decisions I made that are acceptable to Gaia. I can recycle these. It's like virtue signaling, but it's telling Gaia, I care about you. I'm thinking about my decisions as a consumer. And when you go to the recycling bin, that dumpster, it's an altar to the earth god. It's Gaia worship, the green god. And you can go deeper into it if you want to look at the symbolism, the arrows, 3 arrows, the hexagram inside of it, all very Saturnian, all of it part of what? Recycling. But what is recycling in this context? We're talking about the god of recycling of souls, the god of death and rebirth. Deprogram Truther says, so nice to be home. Northern Girl says, hi everyone. Brookbank says, chemtrails forever. We'll talk about those briefly. I did a poll to determine, what people believe in. Yeah, let me just go ahead and get into that. I think I made some tweets. And some people think I'm being contrarian, but I'm really not. People who care about chemtrails are just compensating for a lack of real world concerns. And I think I'm right on this. Find someone who's really ultra concerned about chemtrails who has a real problem in their hands. And I don't think they're there. I don't think they exist. Like, I don't see homeless people with signs warning us about chemtrails. Like, no, it's not a top concern. It's like a luxury thing. Oh, you have the luxury to misidentify clouds and imagine yourself as being somehow oppressed by some hidden nefarious enemy in the government. And it's distinctly a right-wing version of events. The left wing believes the same thing, but they call it climate change. And they blame the right-wingers. So one side blames the other. One's private sector, one's government. Here's another tweet I put out. I just want to see if it went anywhere. It's actually a rumor I started. Rumor, and I started this months ago, or earlier this month. Rumor, MAGA hats with the 45-47 have a squib. Theatrical blood packets inserted behind the numbers, just squeeze. And I posted a photo of the MAGA hat and then a squib. So the idea here would be, and you could probably produce these and sell plenty of them. And MAGAs would wear them. They would all slap their heads at the same time and bleed for Trump. Like, this is a culty thing to do. So they would be into it. But if you look here, this is probably what Trump did. If he didn't cut his ear with a little razor, WWE style, he used a squib. We have to rule this out before you can include the possibility of a bullet. And anyone who still believes that there were real bullets or any shots fired is in a box. They're mind controlled. That's just putting it politely. They Lie We See said, here's a PSYOP detective who sees through many PSYOPs, but he's a moon landing believer. And we'll talk about the fly me to the moon now after I bring up this tweet. So he's referring to a very good Substack, which I recommend. Just because someone has a wrong interpretation about the big picture, I don't hold it against them. But the article here, it's by Peter Liverani, American Moon 2017, Superficially Challenging. And he's one who believes that the moon landing was real. Now, I don't think there are any good arguments for this. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what media is. And if you're in the box, it doesn't contradict itself. You have to go outside the model to see what's missing. For example, if you watch the news with no awareness of psychological operations, with no awareness of what propaganda is or modern marketing, if you watch the news with zero awareness of actors, crisis actors, or psyops, special effects, then you can't possibly arrive at a right conclusion. You just have to hope you're being told the truth. So this psyop detective thinks the moon landing is real, and Fakeologist said you can't help everyone. And I do agree. This is something that has to be done from the level of the individual. You have to decide to be the arbiter of what you believe. But if you're going to default to the screen, that is, if your face is going to be pressed up against the monolith, you're going to be led astray, bottom line. My response here was, they need to watch Fly Me to the Moon. Because I don't think the intention of Fly Me to the Moon is to discredit NASA. But Fly Me to the Moon does present a plausible scenario and its execution for faking the moon landing and why it would be done. Daniel Moore says, don't talk about chemtrails, it derails him. No, I'm actually over it. I've actually made the point that it's been debunked, and the argument for it comes from now deliberate ignorance and dishonesty, disingenuous claims. Like, it's really just a grift for liars and fearmongers who are making arguments from ignorance, and it's really not acceptable. Like, we don't accept the arguments from chemtrail people. We laugh at, I mean, sorry, climate change people. Do we sit there and think, maybe these climate change people have a point? So next time they throw tomato sauce on a painting, let's pause for a moment and think about our carbon footprints. Or maybe when these climate activists are clamoring for higher taxes, we should listen to their concerns. No, we just dismiss it because we know it's bogus. We know Al Gorliani is part of the climate mafia and it's all a big scam. Like, we figured this out a long time ago. So we just laugh at them. I'm at the point now where the chemtrail doozlers are worse than the climate change people. Like 10 times worse. Way more annoying. These chemtrail Gretas should just be ignored unless they provide evidence. You know, if one of them comes down with chemtrail lung, shows us the medical records maybe, but let's just stop giving them any attention. Well, we can give them attention, but not serious attention. And look, you're scared. If you are a promoter of this, I get it, you're afraid. But if you're that afraid, wear a mask. If you're not wearing a mask, I'm not going to believe you that you're afraid. So don't even call in and talk to me about your chemtrail fantasy unless I can hear the mask on your face. Double masked even. Because some say, well, one mask isn't enough. Well, then double it. Triple it. Wear 10 masks if you have to. You don't want to die, do you? We're joined by P Trippa 103. Eric Stevens says, hey Raft. Honeybee says, where's the bots? We had one person accuse everyone here of being a bot. Like, this might just be some kind of experiment on me. Like, literally nothing I'm saying makes any sense. But I'm the subject. I'm like a Truman in a Truman show. Some kind of a guinea pig, unwittingly. And all these bots are just here to reinforce what I say and just see how far I go. Dinah South says, Trump the Cutter. Yeah, Trump the WWE Hall of Famer. Eagle Wing 77 says, in the 2002 movie Time Machine, pieces of the moon fall to the Earth from an explosion that happens from astronauts overriding. The year was 2037. So there's a lot to unpack there. 2037, Room 237, Stanley Kubrick. There's that. Moonfall, which came out in 2022, is by Roland Emmerich, who did Independence Day, which had 9/11 predictive programming. And I've been saying the space 9/11 is being primed. So before 9/11, you had Independence Day and buildings falling when the aliens came over and destroyed buildings, just like happened on 9/11. Well, the same director had Moonfall. Moonfall was his task, to show us the moon falling. And that movie has all kinds of messaging in it. We can go into it possibly, but the main thing is that it has the imagery of the moon falling, and it comes from somebody who does predictive programming. So we're getting the imagery for space junk. And I think I've been vindicated, because I said at the time, they're going to begin introducing space junk in the wake of this movie. And we have it. We have people suing NASA for mental anguish. Not for being brainwashed, because they don't know, but because the space junk hit their house and it scared them. Which I think is weak. Like, you would only have been mentally anguished for like a second. Whereas if you're afraid of space junk, you're always mentally anguished. Like, if we were all afraid of it and we're wearing helmets to bed, then I think we would have grounds for a class action lawsuit. But thanks for the information there. Okay. Nick Finger says, if you're still going when I get off work, I'm going to call. Otherwise, I'll catch the replay. Awesome. Likely we will be. Joined by X322. Symbia has gifted 10 memberships. Again, if you're a lurker and you think you're going to just listen and not be called out, someone might hand you a wrench. It gives away your position. Travis Cloud, Psyops Matter, Multigrain, Plain Decoded, It's Snoopy, Toe Cutter, Rafal, Marie Laveau, LBB Store, Meowry have all received blue wrenches. Or bots, yeah, or bots. Bots' lives matter. I'm fine if everyone here is a bot. I'm all about using the latest technology to move this thing forward. You know how many channels actually probably pay for fake viewers? We've never had to do that. And I've said before, it's always been about quality, not quantity. Like, as long as there's like 33 of us, like, we could accomplish what needs to be done. And when we become more active above ground as this thing rolls forward, the numbers of people who are intimately active in the inner workings are going to be smaller than those who are merely online. And there's going to be a process of filtration as we quarantine. And it sounds culty, because it is, but also because it's necessary, as you will all see, and most of you already know. Ryler says, Olympics is on the 33rd parallel. Terrorist attack now, 33rd Olympics is what will happen. Yeah, there have been many things pointing to that, and a lot of people are hoping for the Eiffel Tower to fall. I don't know if that's even plausible. Could that thing even be knocked down? Like, even for fake, like staged. I don't know how they would do a demolition on such a structure. And I would hope that the Space Needle goes down first. A lot of us are hoping that the space station falls on the Space Needle. I mean, there are so many combinations. Just shuffle the Illuminati playing card deck. Give us something random for once. Like, we were literally expecting Trump to get shot. And you see all these in-the-box media pundits reacting as though it was real. And you see the people who hate Trump revealing how nasty they are. Like, they don't care that the guy was shot at or somebody died. They don't care at all. There's zero sympathy on the left. The ones who are afraid of guns, zero sympathy for the loss of human life. They don't care. It's all politics to them. It's all power. They just don't want people that don't agree with them to have guns. I wonder why. But they're cold, they're ruthless, and they're unsalvageable. Like, when it comes to the planet killer asteroid paradigm shock to the system, I don't plan to reach anybody in Woketown. Like, we're not aiming for Woketown. We're steering this thing towards Trutherville. And then it's going to have reverberations. It's going to impact parts of Normie Land, but it's not going to reach Woketown. You can't reach them. Bach Precision says the Statue of Liberty is a French gift. It will have some connections to France's fate in a future timeline. Okay, a couple things about this. We were discussing Mountain Dew because you had a number of correlations between the big psyops of the day and Mountain Dew cans, starting with Maui Blast Dew, direct energy weapon. Maui gets hit as Maui Blast comes out. And then we see Star Spangled Splash, and then the Francis Scott Key Bridge splashes into the river. Then we have Pitch Black, and we're looking at that as a possibility. And then there's Liberty Chill, and then there's Frozen Fusion. So what do we have here? Liberty Chill sounds like Liberty can chill. Lock down. Set aside your liberties for a minute. And she's not wearing the crown. The Statue of Liberty is not wearing the crown on Liberty Chill. And then the Fusion one may be a reference to the H-bomb. And then you just had the Pitch Black scenario, the blackout in Paris. And the Paris opening had a Statue of Liberty with a broken crown, which is a reference to Planet of the Apes and the whole nuke scenario. So all these things are connecting pretty strongly together, the nuke scenario. They showed the not Fly Me to the Moon, but the timing is interesting because Fly Me to the Moon just came out. Trip to the Moon, the image of the moon with the bullet in the right eyeball, they showed that image off for some reason as well. But the Statue of Liberty with the broken crown, the missing crown, that seems to be adding up to something. And the train disruptions that occurred before the Olympics began seem to harken back to Palestine, Ohio, where you had the derailment and the mushroom cloud. And that city and that event was brought up recently in this Washington Times article about how the most important 42 miles in America right now are the miles between Palestine, Ohio, and Butler, Pennsylvania. So there's connections between the headshot and the nuke, the bomb. There's something going on, and the Statue of Liberty, though, has been playing a role in this story being unveiled. Then you have the band Gojira opening up. Gojira is Godzilla, which is a metaphor for the atomic bomb. And they're singing a French Revolution song adjacent to a decapitated Marie Antoinette. So there's that, which we'll have to factor in. And speaking of French Revolution, the founder of the Patriot Front's name is Thomas Rousseau. And the name Rousseau also harkens to the French Revolution. So there's another angle there. Mango says, pulling the heads out of the masses' asses will take forever. Yeah, we're not even reaching for that. The best thing we can do is quarantine, again, away from the programmed. So the deprogrammed, and deprogramming happens spontaneously. A lot of people naturally do it, but they're never fully out because they don't have the right frame of reference. That's how you can have someone like this individual we mentioned decoding and deconstructing fake events, but they still believe in the moon landing. They haven't gone all the way. But those of us who are self-aware deprogrammed as far as being Psywar aware and seeing how the news is not only bent, but augmented, we need to become a self-aware demographic. We need to actually aggregate on this basis, and that's what I mean by quarantine. You could more accurately describe it as an apostasy, but we're not taking everyone with us. It wouldn't work, and here's why. We're skeptics. We're applying skepticism. That's the bottom line. I say it's a cult, but we're just skeptics. Nobody else is. And we can debate this, and we would win once you examine the argument from authority that comes from the screen that they all accept. But if we're going to be skeptics, we're automatically going to be a smaller number, a minority compared to the believers. So here we are, non-believers, far outnumbered by believers. And if we say, hey, let's let the chemtrail believers in, no. Because the chemtrail believers will not only outnumber us 10 to 1, because they're not skeptics, but you're allowing in an entire demographic that falls for loaded questions. If you can't say, or if you can't explain to us why, what are they spraying, is a loaded question, if you don't see that as a loaded question, then you're not paying attention. You're not being skeptical. You have to be very careful about these smuggled premises, which are constantly being thrown out there from various truthers. And it just assumes its own conclusion, and it's a trick. The world stage is a magic show. It's sleight of hand, optical illusion. It's also sleight of mind. Symbia says IPS, the best cult. Yes, and we were accused of being a cult very early on when we realized that we don't want to have to waste our time dealing with uninformed, malinformed, or simply trolls. Not if we want to make any progress. And we are doing some serious work here. Eric Stevens says, inhaling 33 liters of boiled vinegar cures chemtrail lung. I doubt Crow 777 would dispute that. You know, I was actually looking at trails in the sky today, at condensation trails, and I realized a few things. And I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to get derailed. But I just want to point out that cirrus clouds are quite beautiful. And I'm glad that I don't have a belief system that forces me to see them as ugly and toxic. No one has ruined my skies for me. Armin Rees says, the atmosphere in Paris may be prone to psyops. We'll see. Well, the thing is, Super Bowls, Olympic openings, these always seem like the perfect situation, the perfect scenario. But the event itself, it might be too conspicuous to do something, but yeah, I definitely think so. But I try not to get too apocalyptic or predictive about it, but they are worth paying attention to. I don't have my hopes up for a big thing in Paris because I haven't seen anything heavily predicted. I mean, there's an Illuminati playing card that shows the Eiffel Tower, but right now I'm looking at New York. So I mentioned the Statue of Liberty. Well, the movie Megaopolis, the trailer, really does focus on the Statue of Liberty, and I think it's damaged. I mean, I just saw it for like a split second on the trailer. I'll watch the movie. But the Russian space junk and the Statue of Liberty, Megaopolis, Tower of Babel stuff, I'm not quite sure, but it still seems to me that the next big one's going to be local here in America. Hopefully Seattle. And when I say hopefully, I don't mean any ill intent towards people who live in those areas who don't know these things are fake. I would like to think that the people who are unaware, who aren't mind war inoculated, aren't listening. I don't actually recommend this. I don't tell people, hey, listen to this. This presupposes a certain level of situational awareness, and with that, a certain amount of, I think, um, deprogramming, or rather, I guess a lot of it is mostly breaking habits. But people have to do it on their own. And a lot of people get caught up in Trutherville with good intentions. They know the news is lying. They know you have to be critical and critical thinkers. The problem that we see is that they're only critical against the mainstream, and they don't realize that they've been absorbed into alt media, which is controlled and scripted by the same people. And that's why you have truthers running around looking for a second shooter, because they still think the shooting was real. Symbia says headshot and nuke connection in Fallout. Fallout is about the nuke, and it had the Trump foosball headshot guy. Yes. Yeah, these things have been consistently correlated. And also, when you look at news bending in general and the big psyops, there's always a strong connection with, the and even in newsbenders, I think it started with the atomic bomb. But there's a lot of stuff that connects Kubrick and the JFK thing and the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project. These things are very well integrated. The symbolism is so much about, it's always overlapping, but yeah, there's definitely some connections there. And the foosball head thing, by the way, in Fallout, this is the scene, there's a coup. And right now, Kamala is being accused of having taken part in a coup. So there's this coup where an outsider takes over Vault 33. They clean it up afterwards. There's a blood spot left on the side of the foosball character's head. It looks just like Trump. This is foreshadowing the future. But the thing is, and we casually talk about this because we are pointing out foreshadowing and we are predicting the future, but we're predicting the future fake news, which becomes fake history. We're talking about future theatrical events. Psywar, the theater of Psywar. And the mainstream truthers believe that predictive programming indicates what's going to come for real. The it's realers, as we call them. Like, oh, if I can't tell how it's faked, I'm going to default to it's real. That's like hanging out with a pathological liar that you know is a liar. But then just going like, well, if I can't disprove them, I'm going to trust them. So what does that mean? It means that professional liars just get a pass because they tricked me, so they get a pass. They get control over my mind. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's a magic show, bottom line. Everything here, everything on the world stage is suspect. Fake until proven real. You think there's like some point where they draw a line? Like, no, we can't fake this because, it's cruel. You can't fake shootings. Play on people's emotions. That's really mean. Especially near Christmas. No, they already displayed a propensity for lying. They're pathological liars. They lie when they don't have to because they're forming a false world view. And the fact that they did something as egregious as the moon landing shows you how far they can go and will go and will continue to go. Symbia says chemdoozlers can't sit with us. Yeah, it's like we're assembling a group of people who see what's going on. We're rational, we're level-headed. And you have this other group, and wherever they go, they have toxic clouds over their heads. And there are way more of them than us. And do we want to invite these hordes of people underneath these toxic clouds to come over to where we're having our picnic, to come over to our raft and bring their toxicity? No, I don't think so. So if you can't leave your chemtrails at the door, you can't sit with us. If you have theatrical blood on your hands and you're crying for Ashley Babbitt, you can't sit with us. And if you're voting unironically, you cannot sit with us. Because I'm voting for Harris. I was going to vote for Biden, but now I'm voting for Harris. And I'm voting for Harris because voting is meaningless. It's an indication of your participation. One, you're participating in the Psywar, so you're not a conscientious objector. It's an indication of your belief in this system, which is rigged, which is evidence of Stockholm Syndrome, cognitive dissonance, hopium addiction. But whatever it is, I'm voting for Harris because I want to make the point that all conspiracy theorists will automatically vote for Trump because alt media and all conspiracy theorists have been co-opted by the GOP with the whole QAnon operation, which basically dog whistled to them, promised them a great awakening if they vote for Trump. And so if I don't vote, there's no statement made. But if I vote for Harris, Trutherville's going to get mad at me. They're going to say, you're going to help the other side. I'm like, oh, so you believe voting works. See, that's the problem. You're the problem, not me. So again, I'll be doing it to make a point. If you want to vote for Harris, I might even get a Harris t-shirt. All right, joined by Messianic Charlatan. Sleepy Random says, I'm voting for Maduro. Ollie Goering says, Kamala will break the glass ceiling. She's the underdog in this election. Ted Stryker says, we do not need ants at our picnic. Right, no false flaggers, no crisis actors, no antis. We're anti-anti. Antis think, oh yeah, we are the truth because they're pro-everything government, and we're anti-everything. We're anti-media, anti-government. No, we're anti-anti. Because the antis are controlled by the same puppeteers that control pro. So you have to be anti-pro, anti-anti. You've never heard of this because there has never been a position for the anti-anti. They've always lauded the big antis as the champions, the people, the Alex Joneses and the Elon Musks. And the people who follow those Pied Pipers seem not to know that they're being controlled. And at this point, it's inexcusable. Mason Free says, I'm voting for Hulk Hogan. I'm a Hulkamaniac. Well, when Hulk was on stage at the DNC, he said that you're all now Trumpites. And this is going to be Trumpomania. And there's been some interesting things brought up about this Hulk Hogan appearance. Not only does he reference the Illuminati playing card where Trump's getting shot at by a sniper, but he mentions, in a way, how Trump bladed himself on his way to victory the way that he did during Hulkamania in like 85 or something. Or maybe it's 95. But moreover, the Hulk signature move is holding his ear out, which in retrospect may have a lot more significance. We're looking at this, and it's not a stretch. When you look at how much these wrestlers are used to carry predictive programming messaging. Okay, let's go on. I'm just going to start through my notes here. Laura Loomer, she said, President Trump just re-truthed this photo on Truth that insinuates the FBI director may have been involved or even ordered the assassination on Trump. We can't trust the FBI. The attempted assassination was an inside job. Now, to call it an inside job is to say it's a false flag. If it's a false flag or it's an inside job, if you're an inside jobber, you can't sit with us. Because what you're admitting here is that, oh, it was real, but the government did it. That's what the inside job thing means. And that's a right-wing position. The left isn't really going to go against the dominant mainstream view because it supports their views. They're married to big government. But this is a controlled opposition talking point. This is typical Trutherville guardrailing. So instead of saying, did it even happen? And Laura Loomer is an insider, would have to be at her level of engagement here. I just have to think, because she's pointed out some of the predictive programming in the Atlantic, and since then she hasn't even referenced what she had pointed out before. So I think she's there to sow disinformation and noise. But I said, yes, Laura Loomer, the assassination attempt was an inside job, but Trump was in on the act. And you know this, we aren't all fools. Now, of course, I'll never get a response from one of these controlled opposition agents. If I'm lucky, they'll block me. But the question here is, does she know it's fake? Well, yeah. This is something to consider too, because some people say, well, maybe it was staged by Trump to trick the Democrats and win a PR victory. Well, there's no way that Trump could have pulled this off without the complicity of the Secret Service, which means how many actors were involved? And then the cameramen, these photographers, were they involved? Like, were they tricking? This is the misconception, and this is why the word hoax isn't good enough. The media says we're hoaxers because they want to convey the idea that the faked events or the alleged faked events are hoaxes, which means somebody does something to trick the world, including the media. And shame on them because they tricked us and they had the hoax passed off as real. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that Trump did a hoax. This is much bigger than that. This is an entire simulation. It's a simulated event presented as real. It's a form of propaganda. So if the Trump event isn't real, if it wasn't a real shooting, it would necessarily mean that there was a production team involved here, and that everybody who had any part, any eyewitness, anyone who was a potential eyewitness, anyone delivering video footage were in on it. In fact, there's one guy from the side who has the best view of Trump. And then Trump points, and right before the shooting starts, he faces himself with the camera. He does a selfie, and he makes a sign of the horns, and he sticks out his tongue. And he misses the best part, and likely, of course, by design. But Laura Loomer and others of her ilk are not allowed to talk about the level of fakery being committed against the public, the reality bending. So let's go to this. Boeing's cursed ISS mission may finally make it back to Earth. And then after this, I want to talk about the movie Fly Me to the Moon. Boeing's cursed ISS mission may finally make it back. The vessel's crew, who stayed aboard the ISS, has stretched over a month longer than planned, and they're testing the thrusters. So there's a few comments here. If it's Boeing, I'm not going. The Boeing saga feels like a Greek tragedy. We really need to have them back to the legendary company they were going back to the early days of aviation. Greek tragedy. NASA's history of covering up known issues has me very worried about this re-entry trip. Challenger, Columbia, both had known issues that were ignored. I hope this is not the case, and that they are 100% transparent. Avatar to Go says, it's clear NASA has kept Starliner at ISS to reproduce the thermal profile at White Sands, determine root cause. If you follow NASA briefings, it's explained in detail. They did the work and confirmed it, and this is consistent with their safety culture. So they're talking about safety, but someone said the Boeing saga feels like a Greek tragedy. So the connection here, I think, has to do with Space Odyssey. Because Odyssey is about Odysseus, who, after the Trojan War, he's stranded on an island with the nymph Calypso. Well, the Boeing Starliner mission has these astronauts in the Calypso capsule, and now they're stranded. So the theme of being stranded and Odyssey, and it's overlapping here with Space Odyssey in some significant way. And it looks like a disaster waiting to happen. And one of the things I noticed here was in the movie, and this is concurrent programming, because when did they start making this movie? Because for some reason, Boeing has been highlighted for the last year, ever since Leave the World Behind came out last November. Leave the World Behind comes out, planes falling from the sky, and then we have all kinds of airline incidents, and Boeing is highlighted. You have Boeing whistleblowers, Boeing parts falling from the sky, Boeing CEO getting his $33 million severance pay, Boeing whistleblowers dying. So Boeing is cursed. We pointed this out. It's now an epitaph for disaster. And then the Boeing launch. I'm like, look, there's going to be a disaster. They delay, and now they're stranded. So you have the Odyssey theme here, like in the Odyssey. It's one calamity after the next. Into the, it's like frying pan into the fire, then another frying pan. It's just non-stop calamity. So it looks like this mission has that tied onto it. But the movie now, Fly Me to the Moon, opens up with a reference to Sputnik, which was 10/4/57 when Russia won the space race. They make some references to Yuri Gagarin, first man in space. And then it goes into Apollo 1, where those 3 astronauts died right there in the capsule. Now the capsule is a very significant occult symbol. It's the top of the pyramid. The capstone, the capsule, it's all symbolic here, but the astronauts allegedly burned to death. And so the movie opens up with it, and then you have these explosions. They fast forward a few years where the launch director is checking for leaks. There's this big explosion, and then somebody says, like, Boeing called again. Now, Scarlett Johansson's character has some relevance here. She's wearing pink in multiple scenes. They emphasize that at the very beginning. and they show her pregnant. She's got a moon bump. Is that what they call it? She's got the little fake baby belly, but the pink. Yeah, it's called moon bump. So I thought that was significant. I put that in my notes. So she's fake pregnant, dressed up in pink. Now the significance to pink has been something we've discussed since Barbie came out, and I'd even correlated Scarlett Johansson with the Barbie character and Margot Robbie, because they've been presenting this very specific archetype, which Jack Parsons called the Scarlet Woman. We're talking about the Babylon working, this goddess archetype, this New Age goddess. Scarlett Johansson has this role in Fly Me to the Moon, which has to do with faking the moon landing, but in Asteroid City, she had a sort of an analogous role where she's hanging out with a character who is obviously Stanley Kubrick. Looks like Kubrick, is based on Kubrick, has a camera he's always wearing. And this is another connection too, because she's hanging out with Kubrick in that movie, and in this movie, they have multiple references to Stanley Kubrick. In fact, there's a photographer in Fly Me to the Moon that they show 3 times. One of the times they show him after the name Kubrick is invoked. He looks just like Stanley Kubrick. It's an inside joke. Now, at one point, Scarlett Johansson's character is hired to do PR for NASA and sell various senators on Apollo 11 in the shadow of Apollo 1. And they hire actors to play the engineers for the role of TV interviews because the engineers were not really mediagenic. And so you hear these lines in the movie that are thrown out there as, laugh lines and jokes, but taken out of context, you could take them quite literally. And one of the lines was, "You're hiring actors to play NASA engineers on TV?" And she nods her head. He was incredulous. You're hiring actors to play NASA engineers on TV. And there's a few phrases, statements they make about the purpose of the moon landing, but a lot of it is basically the same stuff, beating Russia. Now, one of her jobs, and she's a marketer, is selling people on the idea of the moon landing. So there's all kinds of products like Tang, Omega watches, Hanes underwear. Everything that's going into space is now being, advertised as it's going to be the first thing in space. And he has this argument with her, the launch director, and he's like, "We can't send all these things into space." And she says, "We don't have to send these things into space as long as they think we are." So there's this, again, kind of a admission there. And I kind of got the feeling that this movie is a total reveal, but since it's a comedy, you can't be mad about it. And maybe this is a soft disclosure. Now, there's another scene where they're selling the moon landing to some Defense Department weapons person. They're saying, if we don't take the moon, the communists will, and this is what they will build. And they present him with a poster that they had made with these colored pencil drawings of the moon and lasers shooting at the earth and communist flags. And he looks at them and he says, "Are these photos?" Like, we haven't even been on the moon yet. He's looking at the photos, or rather the drawings, the renderings, colored pencil renderings. Are these photos? I'm like, that's funny, because we deal with this all the time. People can't tell real from fake. Is this real? Is this a sim? And it was explained to him, no, these are artists' renditions of what it could look like in the future. And he says, oh, these are future photos. And it made me realize that media illiteracy is inculcated into the programmed from birth. That's why there are no deprogrammed unless it's self-initiated. Everyone's programmed. The deprogrammers, the deprogrammed are those who have opted out, but there's no real opt-out that's offered to you. You're automatically programmed. The programmers would have necessarily gone through the programming first as well. They're just let in on certain levels of the bigger deception. Now, this is the thing. They had to create a simulation of the moon landing in case the real thing failed, like Apollo 1. And they didn't want to televise a disaster. So that was the whole point of it. This was a contingency plan. At least that's what they're told. So you have this group of government operatives and this director working in this clandestine operation to fake the moon landing, concurrent with the real thing, in case the real thing goes wrong. Woody Harrelson is the shady government intermediary who's organizing this, which is interesting considering Woody Harrelson's connection to the JFK assassination. His father was a hitman who was allegedly one of the three tramps on the bridge. So there's some reasons why they used him. But the whole point of it here was they were describing the purpose of faking the moon landing. That they had a very important reason. It was about ideology. It wasn't about landing on the moon. It was about beating the Russians. So there's a purpose to the lie. Now, when they pull it off, there are some phrases like he says, "We're making history," which really stood out to me. We're making history. And he represents, again, Woody Harrelson represents Nixon and the president. He's working directly for him. We're making history, yeah, by make-believe. It's a made-for-TV movie. So they're broadcasting a fake feed to trick the public in case it goes wrong. But and this is kind of a spoiler, but again, if you're bothered by spoilers, what are you doing listening to World Stage Deconstruction, where we're offering spoiler alerts for future faked events? But I guess one of the main themes here has been this notion of faking the moon landing to trick the Russians, so NASA was justified in lying, but everything else is legit. So the movie never discredits the space program writ large. It never discredits the space station or the whole program itself. And it also maintains the idea that Russia and America are somehow antagonistic towards one another, when all of the various governments that are participating in the space program are colluding against the masses. This is the biggest psyop is, of course, the one that has everyone in agreement. This idea that man is going to go to space. This is the new heaven. This is this utopian vision. But they're lying for national security. But now here's the twist. It's that at the end of it, they had to broadcast the real thing because there were problems with the fake thing. And when Woody Harrelson's character sees it, he says, "Jesus, that's the moon? It looks so fake." Kind of reminded me of Elon Musk's Duper's Delight, where he's like, "It must be real because it looks so fake." And then someone else says, "We did it," and someone else says, "No, we didn't." So there's constant ambiguity. So it may just be a comedy to some people, but what they really did was they gave plausible deniability. They gave a pass for lying. They gave excuses. You could look at this as showing how America outwitted Russia, and in the end, does it even matter? No, because we won. So I kind of think this could be, as Fakeologist calls it, hoax management. But I also think it's to maintain the idea that if it was faked, it was for a good reason, and it's guardrailed. It never goes so far as to say, well, the whole thing's fake. Or that every major event, historical event of the 20th century was fake. And that's not an exaggeration. So you may say, okay, well, Apollo 11 was fake, Kubrick was involved. Well, do you think 9/11 was any realer? And when we look at the canon of propaganda that we call predictive programming inserted into various films, people will point at The Shining and say, hey, look, here is Stanley Kubrick admitting it. In The Shining, he's showing that he did Apollo 11. And it's not hard to see it. It's not apophenia. It's actually pretty cut and dry. But what's even more, I think, confirmation of this explanation is that it also has predictive programming for events that haven't happened yet at the time. So when The Shining came out, 9/11 had not happened yet. You would not have been able to have ascertained from watching that movie what would have happened exactly. But after the fact, it's very clear. Stanley Kubrick directed 9/11. And if that sounds absurd, it's because you've been conditioned to think that media is reporters gathering the news and giving you facts, that they're not an actual part of the production of the events. It's a big leap for some. They don't know the scale of fakeability. All right, let me check on some comments. Luis Ortiz says, are these celebrities faking their deaths? Or are they being sacrificed? I think it's case to case. I tend to go with fake until proven real. And we haven't seen any, quote, proven reals yet. Ryler05 says they're mocking the masses in these movies. Yeah, it is something of a mockery to be watching a movie and laughing when they're laughing at you. Like, everyone who's laughing at this movie is a dupe who fell for the fake moon landing. And the movie shows them that you might have fallen for it as a fake thing and you would have no way of knowing. And they had every reason and justification for doing so. Jessica Lynn says damage control, they now know most people think it's fake. People will believe it's fake as soon as they're told it's fake because we live in the desert of the designated real. And if we're told it's real, it's real. If we're told it's fake, it's fake. And then all the people who laughed at you or mocked you for calling the moon landing fake, who said, how dare you, that was our greatest achievement. And they always say it, like, oh, we did that to beat the Russians. We beat the Russians. What are you, a communist? How dare you not believe the moon landing? When they tell you it was fake to trick the Russians, they'll act like they knew the whole time. They're never going to give you credit. I think a huge part of the Trutherville population, and for sure QAnons, is this future scenario they all imagine where they get to have their big I told you so moment. Where there's a big reveal, and all the people who didn't believe them are like, oh, you were right after all. Crazy conspiracy theory, uncle. And I'm just letting you know, that's never going to happen. You're never going to get vindication from Normieville. Never. The best you can hope for is you gang up with all the auto hoaxer skeptics and you burn down Normieville in the minds of those who can appreciate what you're doing. You have to bring down the construct. It's all just figuratively speaking. What holds it up? What are the main lies? What are the big pillars? American Father says, so true. Lean Dion says, they believed it for the whole time, but will act as if they knew it was fake. Yeah, and they take pride in it. And I don't understand that necessarily. It's like, you didn't go to the moon. You watched it on TV. You heard it secondhand, third hand, fourth hand. And people used to do this quite a bit with all kinds of psyops. And this is a pretty common phenomenon. Not so much anymore because we have instituted some quality control. We do call it out. But people used to say, I remember the moon landing, or I watched the JFK assassination on TV. No, you didn't. The JFK video, the Zapruder film, didn't show up until it wasn't broadcast for 12 years. I think it was on the Geraldo Rivera program. So 12 years. We used to have people say, you can't say that event was fake. I know somebody who knows somebody who died there. And that shuts a lot of people up because nobody wants to be looked at as cruel for calling an event fake. And a lot of truthers would say, you can't call it fake. What about the families? What about the feelings of the families? I'm like, oh, you're really concerned for the feelings of people you don't know who are undergoing a tragedy, so it's highly unlikely they're on YouTube listening to live streams like this. But they would use this to stop discussion. And I realized later that these were all likely feds, government agents, or well-intentioned dupes who have been trained by government agents to shut down legitimate criticism. And we're the legitimate critics, truthers or not. But we used to have people say, I know somebody who died on 9/11 or died at this school shooting, and when you ask for details, they disappear. We've driven them all away. And if we believe them, if I believed every person who told me that they knew somebody who had a relative who died at this or that event, then 5,000 people died on 9/11. Virtual Reality Witness says, Tim, have there been any real false flags in history in your opinion? The answer is no. There have not been. The media does not report or do anything that they're doing when it comes to these events. They don't report on things where people really die and then dress it up with all kinds of agenda in this way. These are staged and fake. They're hoaxes. If it's a real event, they don't treat it the same way. It has to go through a certain due process. It's an investigation. Like the idea that you would have witnesses to a school shooting going on TV and saying, yeah, I heard a pop, pop, pop. Well, first of all, they had to sign a waiver if they're a minor to go on TV. But second, if you're a witness to a murder, the police are going to advise against you putting your face on TV and making yourself known as a witness when you have to go through the process of conviction. Like the media makes you think, oh, we caught the shooter, we read his manifesto, and he's been convicted. It's like, no, they're not judge, jury, executioner. It's not it's not like Scooby-Doo. I call it Scooby-Doo justice, where you find out who did it and why and unmask them before the end of one episode. But no, the media has never reported, I don't think, on any of these events that were real, that they've blown up to this extent. Like they may report on a real event, but it's not going to become a hashtag, a GoFundMe, and a political campaign. And the number of fake ones that we've looked at, they all fit a certain pattern as well. And all the ones we've looked at this point, none of them have been contradicted. No one has said, hey, look, we found evidence that this one might have been real. No, quite the contrary. Messianic Charlatan says, white supremacists always list the moon landing as a great white achievement. Their black counterparts always bring up bowl cut mass shooters. Yeah, the idea of collective achievement, like, oh, we won the Super Bowl. You never even played football in high school. You didn't win the Super Bowl. You can't, just because you're wearing the jersey, doesn't mean you can take credit. You know, you're cheering, that doesn't help. But to get back to this person's question, have there been any real false flags? The false flag term itself is kind of a military term. So, yeah, there have been military operations where somebody wears someone else's costume. You do have instances of Democrats wearing KKK robes and photobombing Republicans. Like, that's a false flag. A false flag is misrepresenting who you are and scapegoating someone else for your crime. But the idea of false flags in school shootings or false flag in 9/11, these are all descriptions, or the false flag term has been applied to all these events by Alex Jones and others for the purpose of misdirection. So he said 9/11 was a false flag. And what does that mean? It means it was real, but the media is covering up who really did it. So they take a what is it and turn it into a whodunit mystery. So instead of saying what happened on that day, people are saying, oh, this person did it. It was the Skull and Bones. It was this religious sect. It was this ethnic group. It was this, and they have all these scapegoat stories, these various red herrings. But they never ask, is it even real? Like you have this, and it was the same thing in 2020. All the truthers were looking for secret Chinese biolabs. I'm like, okay, you're buying into the false flag theory that it wasn't a bat in a fish market somewhere that started this thing. It was a biolab. So they're thinking it's real, but the media is lying. So it's a whodunit, who really did it. So it's a pattern. And it's not only a pattern, it's a predictable standard operating procedure. I mean, it's so template. You watch any school shooting, any mass shooting, left-wingers are going to say, this was caused by the Second Amendment and gun culture. And the right-wingers will say, this was caused by SSRIs and antidepressants. They've been doing this for 20 years. It's always the same. And why do they say antidepressants? Because they want to blame mental health and liberals. So there's that mental health angle that they both seem to agree on, but it also opens it up for the conspiracy theorists who will say, oh, the psychiatrist was involved in some kind of MK Ultra to turn this person into a shooter for a black op in which they're just a patsy and they're killing a bunch of innocents and then they're going to be killed so they don't talk. Or they're going to be deemed crazy like Nick Cruz so you never hear from them. Every patsy story is a false flag. Every patsy story is fake. So with the Trump event, not only did Trump not get his ear pierced by an AR-15, but the firefighter didn't die. His family lied on TV because they're a bunch of actors. It's a whole construct. Their GoFundMe, it's GoFraudMe. That's a huge fraud. And then what's more, the shooter's not dead. The sniper, the guy who shot at Trump, was not a real patsy. Nobody died at all on that day. Just like January 6th. And why would there be, this is crazy. Why would someone, well, I guess this wouldn't be the case, but you know, like if you were a truther and you're like aware January 6th was rigged and Trump was in on it, there's no reason to fall for the Trump assassination attempt. He's not a threat to the system. He's playing along with the system. He played along with January 6th, a massive honeypot, an operation against the right wing. He was the tip of that thing. So Trump was part of that operation, and it was all fake. All those feds, like QAnon shaman and all these guys, didn't go to jail. If he's part of that, who is he a threat to that he has to be, quote, taken out? It is all a movie. It's a good one. I'm not going to pretend like it's a bad movie, like we're not enjoying it. Elephant Tusk says, in the TV show The Purge, there was a guy broadcasting a radio show called Purge Radio. I think IPS would be a good host for such an event. Well, we will be. During 2020, we did have a lot of reporters going out to various riots to see what was going on, and our intention was we need to have IPR reporters at ground zero for every psyop that pops up, because you're not given enough information on the TV screen to even know it's true. Like, you may say, yeah, I believe the news, and my counter to that is you don't have enough information to believe it. You are therefore a low info believer. Now, if you say, well, I think it's all fake. Well, on what basis do you call it fake? If you can't describe to me why it's fake, if it's just a gut feeling, your intestines told you or whatever that means, if it's just a feeling, I'm sorry, that's not evidence. That's low information disbelief. Like, we need to have an informed disbelief. We need to know why it's fake. And part of it is understanding what media itself is and how often it's co-opted for these purposes. It's not a stretch. It's not even a controversial claim to say that a lot of our history is written in advance. That sounds science fiction until you realize that every single psychological operation, every PR stunt, is such a scripted event. And if it makes it on the news, it makes it into the history books. They script our history fake event by fake event. There are many real events that happen under the umbrella of the big fake events, but they never contradict those. If you have any sort of account or perspective that contradicts the big events, you don't get platformed. There's not a place for it. It gets censored. Okay, continuing. Water Walking Jesus says, in the movie JFK, there's a part where the guy said, it showed up on accident. JFK had been murdered a day earlier when it was supposed to happen in some other country's newspaper. Donald Sutherland. I don't know what you mean precisely, but Donald Sutherland died at 88 recently, and we looked at this as possibly a build-up to Biden dying or Trump getting shot, because the thing is, he played President Snow in Hunger Games, and if you remember, Biden's inauguration was just Hunger Games. Supposed SJ says, sorry for bothering you. I want to offer a promotion of your channel. Followers, views, chatbots. The price is lower than any competitor, guaranteed to be the best. Flexible and convenient order management panel. Everything is in your hands. Go to Streamrise. So if we want to buy bots, we go to Streamrise. Lean Dion says, Hollywood movies push MK Ultra killers, Manchurian Candidate, etc. Yes, and Manchurian Candidate and Suddenly are both movies that predicted the JFK assassination. Both Frank Sinatra films were pointed at as inspirations. They said, oh yeah, before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald watched The Manchurian Candidate. Watched Suddenly. And on the day of the JFK assassination, the news reporters were talking about previous assassinations and the failure of the Secret Service at various points. They were preparing people then. Predictive programming is old. It's actually intrinsic. It's part of the system. It's part of what media is. It's the elite writing history. Jessica Lynn says, Hulk Hogan showing up to speak at the RNC tells you all you need to know. Oh yeah, that's... Not only is it on brand for Trump, but it tells you everything. It truly does. Ryler05 says, Chinese biolab is the equivalent of a second shooter. 100%. Chinese biolab is the second shooter. It's the alternate explanation that those who don't trust the media will believe. And that's why they need it. They need the second shooter so the antis have something to cling on to. So if you're pro MSM, pro media, you're like, yeah, it was caused by a bowl of bat soup. If you're anti, you're like, no, it was Chinese biolabs. This is why I say you have to be anti-anti. The anti position is, oh, it was the second shooter. And it gets very convoluted. In fact, I came across this post. This is like what's floating around in the Quniverse right now, which I want to play. And yeah, I'll play two. I also want to play this clip by Trump really quick here, just to show you how serious this event really was. But and just to wrap up on Fly Me to the Moon. Fly Me to the Moon, again, I think it's a soft disclosure of the official explanation for why they had to fake it. Something that the public will take pride in and will feel like it was a necessary deception. Okay, this is Trump. Oh, I can't view this post because the owner limits who can view. You know, I'm going to have to do something about this. I'm getting these excellent tweets, and I'm constantly being blocked by some of the people I follow. Okay, now this is coming from Q. And this is what a lot of people believe. And this is why I say we have to maintain the purity of our raft. Because there are more people who will believe this stuff than will arrive at a skeptical conclusion as we do. It says, here's the real information behind the scenes and the military operation acquiring the real evidence against the globalists in D.C. before the Trump assassination attempt. This was a confirmed military coup on Trump through the CIA and the Obama globalist NATO UN leaders who all planned it. The White Hats used game theory, a military operation staging a double Trump assassination event. 2 hours before the rally, several FBI, CIA, and military contractors were arrested. And in the mass confusion among the deep state actors, 30 minutes before, they had to cancel their operation to shoot Trump. Then the fake shooter replaced the real shooter who was already dead. Then they had the second shooter on top of the water tower, and they traded rounds with white hat snipers. So now you understand why there were two different shooters who missed. Did you really think the deep state would miss their mark with two different shooters? So if you caught that, the event was real, or it was going to be real, but Trump figured it out, so they staged a fake one. Meanwhile, covered up the real one. Now, this sounds exactly like the movie Fly Me to the Moon, where, we had to stage one in case the real one didn't work, because again, this is cognitive dissonance. That's some serious mental gymnastics, somersaulting. Unrelated news, Nevada's first human composting services company has opened in Las Vegas. And here's I guess it's a human composting coffin. I added a spigot with green liquid and I labeled it Soylent Green. But this is a reality. You know, human composting is going to be a thing. Soylent Green. And I've discussed how the founder of Earth Day, a guy named, they call him the Unicorn Killer, Ira Einhorn or Einhart. Yeah, the Unicorn Killer, the guy who started Earth Day, is known for having composted his girlfriend. They found her in a trunk. And he died. Unicorn Killer Ira Einhorn found dead in prison. He died in 2020. But yeah, this is the guy who started Earth Day, and he was called the Unicorn because his name means unicorn in German. And there's a few movies about him, but essentially the reason why he's such a green icon is because he recycled or composted his girlfriend. Or at least that's why he's infamous, and they don't like to talk about it. They don't want to talk about how the founder of Earth Day was so green, he recycled his ex. But now that's a thing. Now in Nevada, you can do like the unicorn killer. Elon Musk mocked for claiming Christianity's under attack while wearing Baphomet armor with upside-down crosses on his profile. This is pointed out by Futurism. This you? Last weekend, Elon Musk took to X to stand up for Christianity, and he said, unless there's more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish. And he is wearing, now that's not Baphomet, but it may as well be. There's quite a lot you could take apart from this particular costume he's wearing. You could compare him to the Emperor in the tarot cards with the red armor with the ram's head on it. The ram is associated with Mars, as is the metal iron and the color red, Aries. So Aries, ram, red, the red armor, the Emperor, and the Emperor is the fourth tarot card and is associated with Mars. And then, of course, Elon Musk is Tony Stark and Iron Man. So they have iron again associated with Mars. You could even, I guess, point out the Falcon rockets, which were generally red, but the Falcon, which is the Egyptian god Horus, associated with Mars. But this, I call Elon Musk, this is the Pope of Mars, Pope Elon. And if you read Werner von Braun's Mars, A Technical Tale, this is more predictive programming. It's a book about the first settlement on Mars, and it describes the first dictator on Mars would be called the Elon, who would set up an organizational structure comparable to that on Earth in Rome, which is why we call him Pope Elon. And I've been calling him Pope Elon since 2017, and I said that I suspected his historic role would be Constantine, that he would also embody Constantine. And I said so because of the idea of taking people to a Mars base is like putting people into a fiefdom, space communism, which is what the Russians always talked about from the inception of their whole space program. And so what I'm looking at with Musk here is he's the one to sell us on feudalism, neo-feudalism in space or on Earth, because they'll tell us, well, the best way to live is the way they live on Mars. It's sustainable. Let's do that down here. But I suspected that he would be this Constantine-like figure, and I even pointed out how the SpaceX logo, the X is a sword, like the sword of Constantine. Well, later, and this was last year, he buys Twitter, but he puts a big glowing X on Twitter headquarters when he turns it to X. And he said, under this sign, this will be he said, this is the everything app. But Constantine had a vision of a glowing cross, and he said, under this sign, I'll unite the empire. And I think it's highly significant here, because we're talking about the uniting of a worldview. And X plays a huge part in this story as it unfolds. We're talking about essentially the TV as the new Bible, media as the state church. But they're at the point now where we have to have this council where we decide, well, what needs to be banned and cut out in order to have the worldview that the state's going to sanction. And Musk plays a key part in that. He's a fall guy for free speech. Disease X, it's a mind virus, and he's made the case that we're going to have to collectively agree that we need to keep our commons safe, therefore censored. This is cyberspace, this is low Earth orbit, this is, of course, the mind space where we're all attached to cyberspace. We've got to get rid of mind viruses. Don't want a mind virus carrier to spread something to cyberspace that turns into real world violence. So he's a big part of this agenda, but the Constantine role was reiterated with his own glowing cross scenario. But yeah, it's being pointed out that he's a LARPer. Here's the back of his armor, and he bought this at a shop in New York called Abracadabra. Abracadabra is the word of the new aeon, according to Aleister Crowley. The Crowleyan cult of Thelema, the OTO, which is a Templar organization, the Order of the Templar Orientis, they believe that, and this is what they're working towards, that the Great Reset, they call it the Great Work. And they say the Great Work is when we transition into worshiping a new sun. So collectively, humanity is moving from worshiping Osiris, the dying sun god, and transitioning to worshiping the god of Mars. Yep, humanity is being collectively steered by a secret group that want us all to become Martians. And we're not going to be physically going to Mars, but rather the character of this new aeon is going to be, quote, Martian, which means whatever they say, however they're interpreting this. And I think mainly It's the green agenda implemented entirely. It's collectivism. It's this quote sustainable thing. Everything that Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum 666 is about, the Great Reset, is the great work. I've been pointing this out for some time, that even Greta Thunberg's excoriation of everyone, impugning the older generations for ruining the world, that's very on brand for this new aeon. The idea of the new God, in their book they call him the child, the conquering child. So the idea that the elders, the older people with traditions and memories need to go. We need a blank slate to start the new aeon. But Musk is a huge part of that. And it's also kind of intriguing. There's a few things about this we could get into with Musk and this androgen, Horus, and the implementation of the new world religion. And the space program is a huge part of it. And that's why, of course, Pope Elon is such a significant figure in this. And it's a joke that he's really taking us to Mars. This is all just theatrical. But he's quite literally a pope, for all intents and purposes. Side note, we have the birth certificate for Kamala Harris, and her father's name is Donald Jasper Harris. So Donald J. I don't think it means anything, but I just noticed it. Let me go through my notes. Charles Harrelson, what's about Woody Harrelson's father? Says here, it is claimed, it was testified by Joseph Chagra at Harrelson's trial that Harrelson claimed that he shot Kennedy, and he drew maps to show where he was hiding. Chagra did not believe the claim, and the AP reported that the FBI ended up discounting any involvement by Harrelson in the Kennedy assassination. According to Jim Marrs in his book Crossfire, some believe that Harrelson is the youngest and tallest of the, quote, 3 tramps arrested shortly after the Kennedy shooting in Dallas. Now, I've heard about the 3 tramps. According to James Shelby Downward's King Kill 33, they represented the 3 ruffians who accost and kill Hiram Abiff. Mars stated that Harrelson was involved with criminals connected to intelligence agencies and the military, and to Jack Ruby, and had other organized crime links. But yeah, that's a little background. And again, Woody Harrelson's in Fly Me to the Moon. I don't think that's a coincidence. Let me catch up on some comments. Tim, what's your take on Mr. Beast? Mr. Beast, his name is James Donaldson. So you got Donald's son, Jay. There's something there with the whole Mark of the Beast Trump thing. I think it's significant that he's the most popular YouTuber. I also saw there's some drama around him. Pretty crazy stuff, but he seems to have distanced himself from it. But I'll have to wait and see. I don't follow him. I don't know anybody that watches Mr. Beast. Although I know some people. And I what is it called? Schadenfreude, when you sort of like take pleasure in someone else's misfortune. Like, I think it's kind of funny that some annoying people that I know like Mr. Beast. And if Mr. Beast goes down in flames, I can kind of, share some links with them. That's always fun. Because anybody who idolizes any world stager who has a pass by YouTube is following an influencer who's just there to reinforce the big false big picture. They're all part of the big show, whether they know it or not, dupes or not. Rasal Hog 888 says, Nightcrawler 2014, Jake Gyllenhaal is an unhinged stringer who seeks out violent and morbid events late at night so he can film them and sell exclusive footage to news stations. I've heard some things about Nightcrawler. I'll have to check it out again. I started to watch it once. Recently, he was in the remake of Roadhouse. And, okay, in Roadhouse, he's compared to a character from a Western by this proprietor of a bookstore called the Crystal Key. And she says, oh, you remind me of Waco Wade from this book, Death at Double Cross. There's a lot to unpack here. Double Cross, Death at Double Cross. But Waco, Trump, and then Waco Wade, there's just, if you break it down, there's quite a lot there. And what cements it is Jake Gyllenhaal in Donnie Darko is basically Donald Trump. So we've noticed that in the subtext, in the way they convey messaging, these various actors will tend to carry the same messaging from movie to movie. This is one of the first things that made me look closer into movies and how they entrain them with the news and how there are these continuous and contiguous storylines that the actors carry with them. You know, case in point, Jim Carrey and all the various movies that are related to the dog star Sirius in multiple films. Similarly, Jake Gyllenhaal in Roadhouse, there's a scene where he comes out and his right eye is totally bludgeoned from being in a fight. So the wound on the right eye, which mirrors Frank's wound in Donnie Darko, which kind of mirrors the guy Frank Murray in Joker, who gets the on-air head wound, shot in the head. But yes, Jake Gyllenhaal is one to watch for predictive programming. In fact, I have something. There's a movie called Jarhead, and I have it in my notes here. There's a movie called Jarhead where Jake Gyllenhaal...
Thank you for feeding the Quackin McDaniel. The IPS appreciates the support. Thanks for all that you do.
All right, appreciate that very much. Appreciate the support and for feeding the crack Gwyn. If you don't know what a crack Gwyn is, it's the raft. Once it's reached the point where it's unignorable by the mainstream. So thank you again, McDaniel. So to continue here, this is Donnie Darko well, Jake Gyllenhaal. We just call him Donnie Darko. He's in a movie called Jarhead, and he's about to do an assassination. He's a sniper, but somebody intervenes. So let me play this clip, and then I'll point out some of the things that you see here. Now here's Jake Gyllenhaal, and he has his crosshairs right on someone's ear. Now they stop him right before he fires. And okay, it goes on. He's asking for permission to shoot, and they keep blocking him. But listen to what they say here. Those aren't my orders, Marine. Hitman 45. Hitman 45. So they keep repeating Hitman 45. We have the perfect shot. Let's take it. We're waiting for permission.
Get permission from the colonel, sir.
Hitman 45, Hitman 45, this is no sport.
So what is the meaning here? Well, Hitman 45, Trump 45, the 45 on the side of his head, Jake Gyllenhaal, Donnie Darko as a sniper. Just another interesting connection. The other night I was talking to JL and we mentioned the Tom Hanks movie, and Tom Hanks has lots of significance as a psyop actor as well as a regular actor. And in Saving Private Ryan, there's a sniper who's shot in the eye. And the actor, Leo, I think it's Leo Stransky, has Trump's birthday, 6/14. Not a coincidence. But again, Hitman 45, obviously Hitman 45. And then, of course, Frank the Bunny here, which you see with the one eye wound at the end of the movie. Ryler05 says, the guy Wilson in Utopia had his right eye gouged out and then he became Mr. Rabbit. Okay, that's fascinating. I do recall that. That movie is good. Utopia is a great study on predictive programming. In fact, it kind of reminded me of us, the think tank. In Utopia, you have these comic book aficionados who find out that the comic books are predicting future epidemics. Even the death tolls. Like it's actually what we're doing. We're like, hey, look, this is predictive programming. And they are able to get an advanced copy of like the latest comic. And they see it at this comic convention. Well, they weren't supposed to see it. They weren't supposed to know what it was foreshadowing. So the government has some shady agent who goes in and snuffs them one by one, which hasn't happened to us, thankfully. But it was just kind of this notion that the predictive programming was figured out to be literally predictive, and it was being acted on by this group of comic book aficionados. So there's quite a lot in that movie. Stuart McKenzie says Mr. Beast's logo has a damaged right ear. Oh, that's fascinating. I see it. Mr. Beast, and it does have a lightning bolt right there on the side of his head. Fascinating. Rasal Haig says JFK kill shot was from driver William Greer. That's another second shooter. I think it's more accurate to say JFK was shot by Stanley Kubrick, not by Zapruder. Luis Ortiz says there was a pro wrestling stable in the 90s called The Right to Censor, and there's currently a group called Damage Control. Yep. And that's a lot of what we see. Damage control, hoax management. Elon cameos in one of the Iron Man movies, says Lean Dion. Says he's got new tech for Stark. So Robert Downey Jr., who's going to play Doctor Doom apparently, Robert Downey Jr. said that his model for playing Tony Stark was Elon Musk. So Elon Musk, the real world Tony Stark, is the real world, I guess you would call him Iron Man, and then he's taken us to Mars, a planet associated with iron. These are overlapping connections, and it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. You have the Game of Thrones, House of Stark, and the House of Stark has the Iron Throne. So there you have Iron again and Stark. So like Tony Stark, Iron Man, House of Stark on the Game of Thrones franchise, House of Stark and the Iron Throne. Now interestingly, the House of Stark's logo was found on Mars. Here's an image of it. Mars stands with House Stark. So the overlapping connections here, Tony Stark, Iron Man, red planet Mars associated with iron, Game of Thrones, Iron Throne, that's the Stark throne, and they actually find the logo on Mars. Then you have the Starship, which is what the Musk thing is going to be, and the Starship is going to be the thing that takes, I think, 1,000 trips, 1,000 people each. They're going to take 1 million people to Mars, is what he said. But they did find the Starship Enterprise logo on Mars as well. So I can find this. Oh yeah, it's the emblem. But they're constantly finding logos on Mars, just conveniently. NASA finds Star Trek logo on Mars. Now I said at the very beginning that we live on planet Netflix in the Disney universe. And I think Disney owns Star Wars now. So let's look at Mimas. So if you look at the Star Wars franchise, Luke is the sun, Darth Vader is Saturn, and Darth Vader owns the Death Star. Well, interestingly, the planet Saturn has a moon called Mimas, which looks exactly like the Death Star. Not a coincidence. I think we even have Mickey Mouse on Mercury. P. Trippa says, can we call in? Yes. Let me go ahead and open up phones. It's 505-510-4226. We're back to the old Google Voice system, which is good because I also take voicemails and voice to text. So you can call in, you can leave a voicemail. Let me see if I have any. I have a voicemail here. Hopefully it's more than a pocket dial. Okay, next one. Okay, these are people who fell.
Are you muted? I was calling to talk about the Trump assassination.
Okay, well you can call back and we can talk about the fake assassination attempt. Yeah, phones are officially open. Mango Penguin says, great show. Thanks for coming on earlier. Yeah, I was trying to make it even earlier than that. Elephant Tusk says, Mr. Beast's girlfriend wrote a book on marked children. What is going on with this character? And we probably haven't even gone through all of it. Well, let's talk to JL. The Donald son The mark on the ear, marked children. That's really weird. Very strange. What do we make of this? But he does good deeds. He opens up wells in Africa and he does philanthropy. So, as though that automatically absolves him of being any different from anybody else in that arena. Pizzagators. And I don't even believe in Pizzagate, but I think it's pretty accurate to say that there's an entirely different class of people among the programming class. Jake Gyllenhaal was in Spider-Man Far From Home and his character deceives the world. Interesting character. John Cordone says, Agent 47 is the main character in the video game Hitman. Yeah. And we talked about that when Robert Crimo shot up the 4th of July, 4 of 7, 7th month. The 4th of July parade with a 47 tattooed on his temple. And when I saw that, and this was 2 years ago, I said, that's marking the spot where Trump's going to get shot. And that's where the crosshairs were. John Cordone says, what have you done to earn your place in this crowded world today? Yeah, that's because Gaia's love is conditional. And in Utopia, everyone is asked that. What have you done to earn your place in the crowded world? And if you're not green, if you're not living sustainably, if you're not recycling, if you're not confessing your climate sins, if you're not genuflecting before the recycling bin, then yeah, Gaia is going to have words with you. You might be faced with a flood of biblical proportions. And it is true that the Old Testament myth of the flood is what we're experiencing today as climate change. Now, both of these are myths. I want to point that out. Oh, that's right, Tomanoid, thank you. Pluto the dog is on Pluto. We're talking about the Disney universe. So in addition to Saturn and Mimas and the Star Wars connections and the Game of Thrones and Star Trek on Mars, you do in fact have the dog Pluto on Pluto. And another coincidence is that the same year that Pluto was spotted and discovered, they actually, it was the birth year of the dog. So the dog Pluto and the planet Pluto were both discovered in 1930. Pluto appeared in 1930, the dog did, as well as the planet. And if you look at the image here, it is literally Pluto's face on the side of Pluto. Inside jokes. And we're just scratching the surface. Wait until you see the different types of asteroids they present us with. Like, oh, a heart-shaped asteroid for Valentine's Day. Skull-shaped asteroid for Halloween. This one looks like a snowman as we get near Christmas. Constantly doing tie-ins. I mean, Disney tie-ins even. Like, for example, the Ultima Thule image, the most distant object ever photographed in the universe. And it looks like a snowman. And they found this near Christmas. And the name, Ultima Thule, which I believe connects to the far, far north. Well, Olaf in Frozen is the snowman. And people said it looks like Olaf the snowman. Well, Olaf is named for a northern king. So there's this northern king, and then the furthest object ever discovered in the universe looking like Olaf the snowman, who has the name of this, again, overlapping Disney connections. No coincidences on the world stage. Elephant Tusk says, all roads lead to Mars. Watch Total Recall. Now, is that an actual tagline for the movie? All roads lead to Mars? Because if so, that would be a big reveal. Why all roads lead to the red planet. Fascinating. Smarty Pants says, why not just use StreamYards? I may do that. I may look into it. Mango Penguin says, the new Beavis and Butthead, they're smashing ketchup packages, spraying it on the wall, and then ketchup gets splattered on a football player, and it hits him on the right side of his head. Jersey number was 28. Okay, moving on. Love Heart on Valentine's Day, says Lean Dion. Yeah, it's like they can just manufacture anything, and people will believe it. They'll say, no, I'm a critical thinker. I believe in moon landings. Oh, yeah? Well, how come when some scientist who is using the James Webb multi-billion-dollar telescope that you can't get your money back for because it's a million miles away, supposedly, he provides for us an image of a star found 4.2 trillion light years away. And the world just fawns over this image. Oh, this is the most beautiful star we've ever seen. And then he's like, LOL, just kidding. It's a piece of salami. It's a chorizo, in fact. You know, the spicy meat superimposed over a galaxy, and everybody falls for it. It's like, I thought you guys were critical thinkers. You would obviously see through a fake moon landing, so it has to be real, right? But then here you are, mistaking a pepperoni for a star, just because it comes from a multi-billion-dollar telescope. So people who believe in outer space believe in outer space. They don't know what's up there. They merely have various beliefs. And beliefs, you know, today there's no excuse. We're in the information age. We shouldn't settle for second-hand guesses, arguments from authority. Jake Gyllenhaal was in Bubble Boy. He had no immune system. 2020 connection. Yes, Jake Gyllenhaal is a heavily meta-scripted character. It's worth noting that Donnie Darko's director worked on the NASA Mars rover Viking. That's a very interesting point here because you're looking at a movie that contains predictive programming for 9/11, for Donald Trump in 2020, for COVID, and who knows what else, the headshot. So Donnie Darko contains a lot of foreshadowing for future history events that are pre-written. So there's nothing magic about the synchronicities you see between predictive programming and real events. The reason why these things are aligned is not because of a higher power. There are still a few truthers who lean towards the explanation that the reason why Donnie Darko has relevance to future events is because of a supercomputer or some kind of divine explanation. But no, there's a deliberate synchronization. They synchronized entertainment and news on purpose, and it's called entrainment. And they use entertainment to entrain you to future news cycles and current news cycles. We've uncovered it. When you cease looking at predictive programming as anomalies here, anomalies there, when there's just a few of them, a handful, yeah, it's like, okay, these are some interesting coincidences or synchronicities. But when you find that this is the standard operating procedure with clear political utility, it strips away the idea that there's anything mystical going on, unless you want to argue that the force behind synchronistic coincidences in the universe leans liberal Democrat and supports their psyops. Because these psyops are always political. And not only that, but you wouldn't have a divine hand foreshadowing fake events. None of that makes sense when you really get down to it. But we are pointing out that these are meaningful connections, that somebody connected to NASA has a son connected to a movie that is tied into all these fake events to be. Leave the World Behind, which we've been talking about since it came out on 11/22 last year. Leave the World Behind, an Obama production, Higher Ground Productions, has a character named Rose who's templated on Donnie Darko and who is actually called Donnie Darko because she's so weird. Rasal Haig 888 says, "Fly Me to the Moon plus Scarlet Woman Scarlett Johansson, major sexual innuendo." Oh yeah, in fact there's a point in there where she and the launch director are facing each other. She's in red, he's in white. That's very significant in this picture. The fact they show her in Barbie pink is highly significant. And I think even in Asteroid City, where she's hanging out with a Kubrick character, and she witnesses an alien landing in the desert, I think there she represents Marjorie Cameron, who was the first UFO witness. And this was in 1946, after the Babylon working. So they made a connection between the Babylon working, opening the gates to these cosmic energies, and the first light falling down, the first UFO descending. But at the end of Asteroid City, Margot Robbie makes an appearance, who later is again Barbie. It's a whole other side topic to get into the significance of the moon landing from the perspective of NASA being an Egyptian mystery school, which it is. These rockets are literally obelisks. Their function is religious. It's not even utilitarian art. Like, oh, this is art. It's an obelisk, part of our cult, but it also takes us to the moon. No, it's an obelisk, that's all. It's a burning obelisk that flies into heaven, literally, to convince you it exists. But everything you see outside of what your eyes can see, whenever they tell you, oh, this is what's going on outside of what you can see. This is what we see from up here. That's what you could just assume to be fake. But the pageantry, it's all about the mystery Babylon, the what's behind that, which is essentially earth worship. It's like, I would almost call it animism. It's not Satanism. Like, Candace Owens comes out and she says NASA's a bunch of Satanists. No, she couldn't be more wrong about that. That's a very blinkered understanding of it. It's much more complex. It's a science fiction rendition of Mystery Babylon for sure. I call it NASAtology. And I would even go so far as to say that SpaceX is space sex, because space is the new heaven, and sex magic is about transcendence. It's about ascending states of consciousness. And so the idea has been, well, it's the esoteric meaning behind the rocket launch. The esoteric meaning behind it is the Earth God is having a union with the goddess of the night sky. And this results in the conception of the sun for the next day. And over the course of the day, the sun is battling against the force of darkness. The ruler of darkness is Saturn. And this is where you have Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader. The symbolism here is that the sun is the Skywalker, battling the darkness. And over the course of the day, hour by hour, it loses its strength. This is the sun god's dismemberment. Osiris gets dismembered by the Prince of Darkness. So at the end of the day, when sun sets, the sun dies. And then he's buried, and they can't find his severed phallus. This is the Egyptian mystery school story. So the night goddess, Isis, puts his body back together and puts an obelisk on his grave. Go to any graveyard and look where the Masons are buried. They all have obelisks. Yeah, that represents Osiris and his resurrection. So now the rocket is literally an emblem of the Earth God. And so, of course, they're launching it into space. Symbolically, it's just the conception of the sun. Okay, moving on. And I have a lot of reasons to say this, and it's pretty clear that NASA and SpaceX, it's all NASAtology, and it makes a lot of sense when you read back Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and even Scientology. Understanding what Scientology is puts all this into the right perspective. Elephant Tusk says, Lord of the Rings is a reference to who controls or drains the power of Saturn via its rings. Yeah, I think that's probably the case. The Eye of Sauron. The idea of Saturn being the ruler of the world or one of their gods, it's one of their more overtly represented symbols, and it does, I think, represent the control over time and space. And the black cube or the monolith or even the screen, it is the main, I would say the main god. It's like it's the two. They worship Saturn and the sun. So you can't say, oh, they're Satanists. Well, no, they actually worship these various gods, which are all personifications of the forces of nature. So I don't know what you call them, animists. I see hints of panpsychism. The god of recycling, because in its modern incarnation, the earth god, the green god, the god of recycling, of souls, death, resurrection. So it seems that they, and I'm basing this off of Aleister Crowley and Scientology, it seems that it's an older religion. It's just pagan. And there were some people saying, "Oh, well, the Olympics were mocking the Last Supper." No, the Last Supper is templated off of something earlier. I would say that Dionysus pre-existed Christianity. The worship of Dionysus, the whole mysteries, and this is where the mysteries come from. The idea of the going into the underworld in this cycle. But one more point. They say mysteries because it's veiled to those who aren't initiated. When you get initiated, they lift the veils. So the mystery is demystified. And what are we doing here? But demystifying media, pulling back the curtain, showing you what's fake, showing how to know what's fake, showing the fakeability of it all. The fakeability of it is what most people don't even calculate. They operate under the false premises that it's real until it's exposed as fake, and the media cares about its credibility, so it's going to expose fakes from within. And they cement this notion by presenting you with Jussie Smollett-like situations. Like, oh, this is a hoax, and we called it out. No, that was a hoax that you called out in order to distract from the fact that you're all in the business of hoaxing 24/7. Okay, back to my notes. We're still just trudging along. There's so much. We went over the Jake Gyllenhaal thing. Let's look at this. This is pretty good. This is kind of a mashup. I think Rush Limbaugh actually pioneered this idea of compiling media references to like a specific meme. So right now the meme of the day is weird.
They are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate are weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird. It's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings, weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
It goes on for the full minute of weird, weird, weird. So just so you know, that's a meme right now to inoculate yourself against. Interesting comment by, I think it's Immortal AI, regarding Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. He says, Luke Skywalker could represent Horus, and his father Vader could be Osiris. Yeah, and Vader, Darth Vader, Dark Father. You're right about that. And Osiris is defined here, Egyptian Lord of the Underworld, Judge of the Dead. And it's just a story, it's personification, but the idea is that, yeah, he dies, but then he is reborn. So even though the new sun is conceived in the night, the new sun that is born is actually him. So he's self-reincarnated. Again, it's strange, but this is kind of the story that we see, the cycle here, that is consistently replayed in movies like this one and other movies. I could point out various Saturn archetypes, but even there's a connection here with Saturn and Osiris. There's a connection that has to do with the Lord of the Underworld and the way that they're symbolically represented. Even the name Moloch. There's actually a bit of syncretism. There's a great deal of syncretism involved when you look at, well, why do all these symbols align? And it makes perfect sense when you pull back the curtain and understand what they're really telling you. So here you have Lord of the Underworld, which fits in with Darth Vader. And then there's something else too. He was depicted with the complexion of either green, which is the color of the rebirth, because of course he's the earth god, and the earth connotation, the grave, gravel, grave. Even gravity has this connotation of falling as opposed to the ascension, the down, up, sun ascends, the darkness, and the sun, the idea of the grave and descent into the underworld. But the color is associated with Saturn as black, or it's black because of darkness and death, but the new life that follows would be green. So you kind of see these interchangeably. So the green movement today represents the rebirth. But he was depicted also as black, alluding to the fertility of the Nile floodplain. So you look at Darth Vader, and he's black, and he has a skull face. And if you look at that skull visage, and this is pretty much the perfect representation of this deity in a science fiction context. Now, one more point here. Darth Vader is fighting Luke Skywalker, and this will confirm what I'm saying. He's the scene where he says, "I'm your father." The Mandela effect would get really confused by that. But the real meaning is this. One, you look at the symbolism in their fight, and their swords, their lightsabers are crossing. But what happens to the sun god in the fight? You know, he gets chopped up. And so Luke gets his hand severed in this fight, and then he falls, and he hangs in Cloud City from a cross. So you find the image here. This is Luke hanging from a cross in Cloud City after he has his sword hand removed. So this is sort of like a Christ connection, but also the dismembered Osiris, because what does the sword hand represent in this case? Well, the lightsaber, light and life, and the symbol of resurrection, the obelisk. So the lightsaber is actually a symbol of the obelisk, and the fact that his hand was severed represents that part being severed. And then he's hanged, then they reattach it, and he comes back. But you can kind of see here that they're using all the same old religious motifs, the same symbols, but they don't tell you. When you're watching Star Wars, you're actually watching the mysteries, the pageantry of Mystery Babylon, interpreted through a science fiction lens, because you're being indoctrinated into the global church of Nasatology, which has an exoteric and an esoteric aspect. All right, let's continue. Phones are open. 505-510-4226. If anyone has anything they want to add, we're talking about pretty much everything from squibs and Trump's hat to general media manipulation, concurrent programming. In fact, there's a pretty great example. Aegon's burned face in Game of Thrones. We pointed this out the other day, but since we mentioned Game of Thrones, this is what we would refer to as concurrent programming, where you're inundated with messaging. So even if you didn't watch the news, you're still going to see and experience the zeitgeist as they want you to experience it. And here you have a blonde character's ear pretty much singed off here. Not a coincidence. I put out an article called My Top 11 Donald Trump Headwind Predictive Programming Examples, and I have many more to add since then, since I've written that. Things that have come out after the fact. So just kind of an indication here that we're looking at predictive, concurrent, and reinforcement programming. Programming after the fact. I call it an immersive illusion, which is what was a term used to describe that TV show called Space Cadet, where they convinced half a dozen people that they were in space as part of a TV show / hoax. And apparently it's pretty easy to convince people that they're on a spaceship. I mean, most people are convinced, and I'm agnostic on it, that we're on spaceship Earth. I'm very skeptical about that. Does anybody believe that Earth is a discrete, disparate object floating through a vast abyss? Anyone? Or are you undecided? I think it's perfectly reasonable to suspend judgment. Wayne Dion says Golden Bull at the Olympics. Yeah, the Olympics opening ceremony is something that we've been looking at pretty closely, and there are instances of foreshadowing that suggest, I think, that the Statue of Liberty, that's the main thing, the Statue of Liberty. So I wanted to play this, and I'm going to play this in an incognito window. So this is Donald Trump talking about how he was shot, and he talked to the widow. So he talked to the widow of the fireman who had been shot. And you got to hear what he says here. It's pretty much what I would consider to be, I don't know if it's duper's delight, but it's an indication of how unserious the assassination attempt was, how unserious the loss of life was, because it wasn't real. But listen to this. This is Trump kind of making a joke.
Corey's wife said, "I'd rather have my husband." Isn't that good? I know a lot of wives that would not say that. I'm sorry. They would not say that.
That's pretty funny. I'd rather have my husband. I know a lot of the wives who wouldn't say that. Now, I don't think you'd be joking about such a serious situation if it was real. I mean, that's just me. It just seems too soon. Is it too soon to make jokes, about the dead guy? Apparently not. Dune has banned witches, American Horror Story, KK Witch Coven, says Tomanoid 3. I'd like to know more about that. You mentioned Coven. American Horror Story Coven was starring Lady Gaga, who was at the opening of the Olympics wearing pink. And pink, Barbie pink, has a great deal of significance. We were talking about the significance of Barbieheimer and Barbie and the Bomb. And Barbie and the Bomb, or Babylon and the Beast, these were prevalent throughout the Olympics opening ceremonies. And the blackout seals it. So Mountain Dew has been pretty much a solid source of predictive programming, and we're waiting on the one that says fusion. Curiosity posted this. This is an actual NASA photograph, and they said, from 1,000,000 miles away, NASA captures the moon crossing the face of the Earth. Yes, this is real. If you have to say it's real, it's kind of like when someone says, honestly, and I'm not lying, I'm telling you the truth, honestly. When somebody has to tell you honestly before they say something, maybe there's a reason why. And if they have to say, yeah, this is real, oh, it's not fake, who's even bringing up fake? Like, are you feeling guilty here? And notice the credit goes to NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and their logo is a dove. Just like Noah from the Bible, Noah is always warning us about floods if we don't change our actions. And Noah from the Bible is symbolized by a dove. Then there's this. Now, I didn't want to get into chemtrails, but I just want to point out how dishonest the chemtrail doozlers are. So this guy who has like 10 million subs, I mean, you don't get this kind of traction if you're not pushing disinformation. He says this is what happens when a jet plane turns on their stratospheric aerosol injections during takeoff, creating ground chemtrails. So a concerned citizen with 472,000 followers is showing this video of an airplane spraying chemtrails at ground level. Now, this is a typical truther, which is to say he's a liar. They lie to themselves, they lie to each other. It's just a cult of liars. Well, it turns out this is in Siberia at negative 45 degrees Celsius. So from the ground, you could have chemtrails if it's cold enough, which kind of leans me to believe that the explanation of these trails being the result of rarefied air, low temperatures, really high, makes a lot of sense. But why would someone lie is my question. It's engagement bait. It's for clicks, it's for money, I guess. But since when was it cool for alt media to make up news for money, to manipulate people? This is exactly what mainstream does. This is in fact exactly the same thing. This is why I say the chemdoozlers are worse than climate change people, sharing videos of panda bears stranded on chunks of ice because ice caps are melting. Like, how is this any different? It's not. That's what I'm saying. If you're a chemtrail doozler, you're disinvited from the Auto Hoax Convention. And there will be one. CIA denies conspiracy theory that it used MK Ultra on Trump shooter. Thomas Matthew Crooks wasn't part of a Manchurian candidate-like plot, says the spy agency. There you go. Officially approved alt media guardrailed false flag conspiracy theory. You're allowed to promulgate this, and they will respond to it. Just can't call it fake. Okay, here's a compilation of Veep and Harris to show you how psyops imitate art, and then life imitates psyops. This is Veep and Kamala Harris.
Words have many meanings, and sometimes instead of conveying our meaning, they can suggest other meanings.
When we talk about the children of the community, they are a children of the community.
Well, we are the United States of America because we are united. And we are states.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Whatever we have in store cannot be known. The past was once the future. The future is, I should say, unknown.
It goes on and on for about 10 minutes, but basically, we're about to have Veep as president, I guess. Catching up on comments. Rasal Haig says crowds on demand. Lean says Dune is dupe. I want to watch Dune. I haven't watched the second one, so I want to watch the first one first. But there are a few really, fear is the mind killer is one of the better quotes. But I came across another one recently that has to do with how they are creating believers because thinkers are dangerous. And they made this distinction between believers and thinkers. I'll see if I can find that quote from Doom. Here it is, Frank Herbert from Doom. He said, knowledge can be... No, that's not the one. Here it is. They're not mad. Now this is funny. This refers to mainstream mediated minds. The normies out there. The wokesters. The truthers. Quote, they're not mad. They're trained to believe, not to know. Belief can be manipulated. Only knowledge is dangerous. Exactly. See, we know what's going on, and they believe in second shooters, third shooters, plots to fake an assassination, to co-opt a real assassination attempt by the deep state, all kinds of stories that are super convoluted, and none of them lead them to the truth, which is the scale of the fakery. But yes, they're not mad, they're trained. So by trained to believe, not to know. Well, for one, they're inundated with so much news that they can't parse it all. So they don't know what to believe. So they follow blue checks. They pick certain pundits. They don't have enough information to know, so they just choose the beliefs that suit their political predilections. But it's a world of subjectivity. The world stage is a world of ignorance and subjectivity. There are no objectivists. You realize that we are the only objectivists on Earth? I mean, Ayn Rand doesn't even know. She never knew. She couldn't have known that her whole philosophy was put through the reality wood chipper. When she put her objectivist philosophy, this new epistemology, through the mainstream media framework, even then, with all its built-in assumptions, atom bombs, weapons of mass destruction are a huge part of this modern paradigm, space travel. When she put her philosophy through that lens, it became subjective. Now, there may be objective in a few areas here and there, but no, big picture, no, they lost it. There is no objectivity outside of the deprogrammed. The only people with an objective view are programmers at the very top who know what's going on because they've been let in on the secrets, the insiders, and those of us who have figured it out on our own. And this is not supposed to happen. Alternative thinkers are supposed to be in alt media, and we're supposed to be following alt media talking heads. But we went ahead and bypassed that. We went over all of the guardrails. Shadow of Urza reports a Secret Service counter-sniper whistleblower issued a chilling warning in an email revealing the agency should brace for another assassination attempt against Trump before the election. I want to just give a shout out to Jurassic Liars. because he's been pointing out August 4th as the big day for a long time. And here we are, 4 days away from that day, which is this Sunday. The whole point here, I think, is that they're preparing us for the next level of this thing. And he's been saying August 4th. And so I think this is somewhat vindication. This is a very explicit warning. And here it is coming up on that weekend. Now, we have found a lot of strange things. Synchro Morpheus has uncovered this. Marvel tortures Wolverine, because Wolverine regenerates. And there's all this talk about Trump and how fast his ear regenerated. And we're thinking, maybe this is part of the story. But here's what Synchro Morpheus found. Here's a scene. There's a couple of things. One, Donald Trump's hair has been compared to the Wolverine. That they've made fun of him for it. They've said a few times that his hair looks like the Wolverine. And I think you know what I'm talking about. You see the two wings on top? A lot of people have mocked this. But now, the reason why this is significant, like, who told Trump Wolverine hair looked good? What's with Trump's Wolverine hair? There's been a few examples of this, a lot of them actually recently. But Wolverine, known for regenerating, and here's a excerpt from a Marvel comic. He says, wow, just found this. And it has Wolverine getting his ear ripped off. But anyway, he's suggesting here that there may be some significance here, the world marveling, following the beast. But again, we're just saturated with predictive programming, and to see the Wolverine ear connection, maybe it's a little spurious, maybe not. I think it's probably connected. Here we have the Penguin official trailer. So the Penguin movie is it's a series that's coming out. And one thing that stood out, it looks like it's going to be great. Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. I think when Batman came out, we pointed out that, isn't it interesting that the bad guys in the new movie, one is the Riddler, who's like a Q-like character, and then the Penguin. But the Penguin here says this is a darker, sinister Penguin, like a Tony Soprano, who wants to, quote, tear down the empire from the inside out. It goes on to say that Colin Farrell, who plays him, transforms into the pure embodiment of the Penguin, not dissimilar from Heath Ledger's Joker. Should be interesting. I don't have too much to say on it, but I'm going to watch it for sure when it comes out. The next big thing, I guess, is 10-4, which is Joker 2. And we've talked about the numerous connections between Joker and major world psyops and Trump and the Trump trials and Joker and the people around the trial, bringing Joker into the equation. Again, Trump arrested 4/4/2023, Joker 2 filmed outside. Robert De Niro killed on the latest Joker movie with a headshot, whose character Travis Bickle inspired the guy to shoot Reagan, and he's hanging out outside of the Trump courthouse. This is an interesting one. Nobody knows who played the Wizard of Oz, the head, not the actual old man, but the actor who played the giant green head is uncredited, and nobody knows who played him. Just an odd bit of trivia that popped up in my feed. All right, we've covered most of my notes. There's still a whole lot more to catch up on. The other day we brought this up. Gene Puskar, Associated Press, for 45 years, did one of these photos of Trump that made it onto all the newspaper covers. This is a pretty popular photo of Trump. And this photographer also did photos at the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island. So 3 Mile Island, nuclear accident, Trump shooting. Another connection, Trump shooting, headshot / nuke event. These things are consistently being portrayed side by side. Okay, moving on. Violet Penguin says, LOL, definitely Wolverine tie-in. Yeah, it's a strange one. But Marvel Comics Marvel Universe is also a source of predictive programming like crazy. Ollie Goering says, I think Kamala's a genius if her word salads were actually occult messaging. We got to play it backwards. You know, yes, we can. Thank you, Satan. Yes, we can. And then, yes, I think it was yes, you were. I think there were a lot of Trumpers that were chanting at Trump something like, yes, you were. And it sounded like, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. RNC chants, yes, you are, after Trump says, here you go. This is it, when he says he wasn't supposed to be there. So Trump says, I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. And they say, yes, you are.
Not supposed to be here.
Yeah, a lot of people have pointed out, it sounds like they're saying Yeshua. I think JL had pointed this out. And then listen to yes, we can. Thank you, Satan. And maybe it is true that we process this stuff, or we get the stuff downloaded into our subconscious, and that maybe on some level we are processing it backward and forward. But here we go. This is Obama thanking Satan.
Yes, we can. 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 Thank you, Satan. Thank you, Satan. Thank you, Satan.
Okay, it sounds like thank you, Satan. And then, if you take the names, the daughters, Natasha and Malia, spelled backwards, and this is fact, you get I am Satan. Spelled backwards, Malia is, and then Natasha, and you remove the letters Allah. So you remove A-L-A-H. So you remove God, and you get I am Satan. Very interesting connections there. Sure, they're just coincidences. And wasn't Obama running around in some Satan costume at some party? Although the creepiest picture of Obama, I don't know if it's the creepiest. There's so many of them. There's this really strange one where he's on a boat and he's strangling Richard Branson. Do you remember that one? I don't know what to make of it, but they're like on a boat, and I don't know why the Secret Service would allow this. Like, would they allow just anybody to put their hands around Obama's neck? I don't know what that means. Another one of these space fakers. Backmasking with Tim, right on, says Mango Penguins. Yep. Okay, so I think we've covered everything I wanted to cover. There's still a lot more, but this is going to be a big weekend. We're talking about 8/4. This is the date slated for the head wound. The ear thing was just a lead up. That was just a setup to get everybody looking. Let me play this clip. I think this is the one where Johnny Depp says something about shooting the president.
If Donald Trump is elected president of the United States, in a kind of historical way, it's exciting because we will see the actual last president of the United States.
Oh, he calls him the last president. Another time he talks about it being an actor. It's been a long time since an actor shot a president. Illusion Warfare made an interesting point here. He quotes Masaru Emoto, who said, "Water is attempting to communicate. Negative emotions prevent the water from crystallizing. Positive emotions allow them to develop into beautiful hexagonal shapes." Now, whether you believe this or not, a lot of people do. Illusion Warfare says, chemtrails are just like the vax, simply water, until the observer puts a positive or negative intent into the water. Truthers have a lot of blood on their hands, turning saline into the clot shot nanobot injection. So I said the same thing. I said if you take into account placebo effects, psychosomatics, you could argue that any deaths attributed to the pokey, any deaths attributed to cirrus clouds could be pinned on truthers. That their paranoid beliefs created these perceptions and their intentions and negative emotions. Paranoia is a negative emotion, by the way. And so, yeah, truthers are actually killing people. You look at the VAERS reports. Yep, that's likely the paranoia and the placebo effect. It's far more likely that than anything else. So you have blood on your hands, truthers, according to illusion warfare, and I agree. Ryler05 says, Trump said we won't need to vote anymore. Yep, they've been making these points that Trump is the last president, that he's going to fix it for good. All right, if you want to follow me on the newsletter, ips.monster, you don't want to miss Sunday. So we're going to be doing live coverage of whatever's going on Sunday, and we're going to be watching the news cycles closely as it leads up to it, because it does seem like 8/4 is probably going to be JL's date. I mean, he says it might be next year, but I think it only makes sense this year. And I honestly don't see Trump even lasting another year necessarily in his present form. Like, as far as being this polarized, as having this much power, as being this much of a threat to the left. Like, this is the time if they're going to pull it off. And also want to point out that in Civil War, the movie Civil War, the Trump character was killed, and they insisted that a black woman kill him. Like, it was basically a movie about killing Trump. So that kind of tells you something. It's all symbolic, of course. And then Trump went out today, and he spoke at a gathering of black female journalists, and he made what will be considered racist statements about Kamala Harris denying her heritage, or rather, I guess, adhering to something she used to say. But it's again, identity politics. It gets really convoluted, and I don't really care to get into it. However, I am voting for Harris, as I said earlier. Definitely voting for Harris, just to make a point. But Trump has been going out there being polarizing, being threatening to the left, and I think this is the year it's going to make sense. And even though I'm not big on dates, that particular date has too much significance. The episode Assassination Run on The Boys, Season 4, Episode 8, 8448, they changed the name of the episode because Homelander, who's based on Trump, has a situation with an assassination attempt, blood on his face, turning it into a PR opportunity. So the fact that they changed it because it was so close to the real news shows you again that we're right on target with our examination and our deconstructions here. But yes, 8448. And then there was, just to go back, there was a 4.8 mag, like MAGA, 4.8 mag earthquake. And it was pointed out that this had a ground zero epicenter at Trump Golf Club. USA Today, now this has been disputed, but it was originally reported that 42 million people, now think about that number, 42. 42 miles between Palestine and Butler. 42 million people felt the quake. Donald Trump's Bedminster earthquake, New Jersey. 4.8 earthquake. On Drudge, they said 4.8 mag. And they had a crosshairs over Trump's golf course. So again, 48, 84. It's just so consistent that there's no way, in my opinion, I don't think there's any way it would make sense for this Sunday to be a nothing burger. I think it's going to be something burger. T Latte says, I'm voting for Trump to go against those black Democrats who are bullied. Well, yeah, voting for any reason, if you mean it, is wrong. It means you're participating in the Psy-War. It means you're not a conscientious objector. It means you're not anti-war. You're participating. You're part of the problem if you vote and you mean it. If you vote unironically. But if you vote ironically, and if you vote to make a statement like I am, I totally will support it. ISA says your vote doesn't count, sweet cheeks. My vote will count, though, because I'm voting for Harris to make a point that anybody who thinks voting matters needs to be called out as being duped. And when I announce this, hey, I'm voting for Harris, you know how many Trump supporters, how many QAnons are going to say, this must be a shill channel. controlled opposition. When in fact, no, controlled opposition is voting for Trump. That's the anti-position. 737 says I'm voting for the nuke. All right, this has been great. I want to say thanks. A shout out to Symbia for gifting 10 new blue wrenches. And if you go to the main Infinite Plane Society channel, I'm establishing a habit of uploading a 5 to 10 minute preview video for what we're going to call or talk about that day and what we're going to take calls on. Ollie Goering says IPS votes Kamala and ironically she wins. You know how many people will be mad at me? Flozik says I'm voting for Chupacabra. Yeah, it's not even a protest vote. It's better than a protest vote or a non-vote or voting for like an RFK, which is just unconscionable. You know that guy walks around like in airlines, in airports, in the bathrooms barefoot. Like he's anti-vax. He's scared of vaccines, but he's not afraid of walking around barefoot in airports. Vote Pedro. Well, I'm not even interested in taking part in this, but I am very interested in taking advantage of the fact that when everyone's distracted and when they're lining up behind their chosen Pied Piper, we're going to stand out. We're going to stand out, not like a sore thumb, but like a shining beacon in a world of darkness. The quarantined auto hoaxers as not a voting block, but as a non-participation. It's not even that we're collectively deciding not to vote, but we're just aware of what it really is, and we can talk about it without any presuppositions that, oh yeah, it really matters, or like, why would you even? At this point, I understand 2016, there was some hope that this guy was an outsider, but looking at the body of predictive programming that told us that Trump was going to exist in this form, nothing about it is authentic. And what seals the deal is the Robert De Niro connection and those bits of predictive programming from Machete, which I talked about in my article, Top 11 Donald Trump Predictive Programming Examples. If you haven't read that, I'm going to put a link to it below, because this shows you how the predictive programming for Trump pre-existed Trump in his present incarnation. Before he was even a politician, they were preparing the world stage for the emergence of Trump. And it's so specific that the very words he was saying when he was shot mirrored the words said by De Niro when he was shot in a 2010 movie. And the explanation for the shooting attributed to the shooter matches up with Machete in the movie Machete's explanation for shooting De Niro. It is just too much to discount this as coincidence, but it's also enough to rule out that this is the result of anything more than just man manipulating man. I mean, man writes holy books. Man writes the news. He fakes the history. It's all consistent. It's very on brand for what we are. You know, we're a species of liars. And it's not just liars at the top tricking us. No, it's liars all the way down. Look at Trutherville, presenting false evidence. And why? And most of it's for paranoia, to spread fear. You know, fear is the mind killer, as they say in Dune. I saw this acronym. I think it said FEAR, which is fake evidence appearing real. I believe that's it. All right, this is Chief Crow. The edge is in your mind. Thanks again for all the comments, and we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Again, save Sunday. Sunday is going to be a big deal. Hope.